you missed it, unfortunately, but just before filming, we had our first little lad drop off this month. I think a few have fallen off so far, but he's the first guy to go recently. Welcome everyone to the Morning Bible. This is hay fever edition, this one. I've got chamomile and honey tea in front of me, so hopefully that helps according to the internet. But, oh man, I was sneezing a lot before we started and my nose was running something terrible. So let's hope we don't have to deal with that. We are going to be in Luke once again today, Luke chapter 5, kicking off a new chapter. So what's happened so far is Jesus has begun his ministry, essentially. He got kicked out of the synagogue for reading an old bit of scripture and saying that he was coming to fulfill that. Coming to fulfill a prophecy that said he would basically save the world. And then he pulls a demon out of a man, or he rebukes the demon, and the demon comes out and says, it's Son of God. And then he heals a ton of people, each one by one. And then he pulls out another demon. And he heals Simon's mother-in-law. And then he preaches in the synagogue. So Jesus is getting busy, basically. He's doing a lot of things. And so, he's out and about, he's doing a lot, but so far he's just mainly on his own. He's got Simon, who has been mentioned a couple of times so far, but aside from Simon, he's mainly on his own. So let's see what happens in this next passage, Luke chapter 5. On one occasion, while the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. So the Lake of Gennesaret, my notes just say, is the Sea of Galilee. So he's still in the same region. He was at Capernaum before, which is a city of Galilee, and then now he is by the Sea of Galilee. So it's all kind of same territory. Sorry, that was a big sniff. And he saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. So the fishermen had come in for the day, they brought their boats in, and they were just washing off their nets. Getting into one of the boats, so Jesus just goes, I'll get in one of them, completely carefree. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, so Simon, who was mentioned before, Jesus healed his mother-in-law, now Jesus is getting into his boat. Getting into one of the boats, which was Simon's, he asked him to put out a little from the land, and he sat down and taught the people from the boat. So Jesus had this big crowd gathering around him, all of them coming to talk to him, or rather come to listen to him while he talks to them. And he was getting really hemmed in on the shore, so he hops on Simon's boat, goes out into the water so that he can preach to all of them and they can all see and hear him. Which Jesus does this quite a lot. He is a very popular guy, so a lot of the time he has to sort of pull back to be able to speak to everyone. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." So he's saying, go out a little bit further and throw your nets into the water and we'll catch some fish. And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing." So Simon calls him Master, which is quite interesting. My notes say that it would have been maybe seen as rude, Jesus just getting into his boat and doing all this stuff, but the fact that Simon calls him Master shows that Simon already respects him and trusts him and doesn't take any offence from this. "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing." So when they were washing their nets, that was when they'd come in after a full night of fishing. And they hadn't got anything from it. But Simon agrees to follow him. He says, "But at your word, I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. So Simon's like, "You know what, because you told me to, Jesus, I'll just give it a go." And so he puts the net in, and it's so full of fish that the net is fit to burst. They signalled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. So this is 2 boats worth of fish now. And they came and filled both boats, so that they began to sink. So it's more than 2 boats worth of fish. They've got a huge amount of fish just from letting down their net once. Which is unprecedented. When Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees. So he's called Simon Peter here. We'll talk about that more later. Just still Simon. Saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." And so what is this reaction? Like, imagine catching loads of fish and you turn around to the guy who tipped you off and you go down on your knees and say, "Depart from me, O Lord, I'm a sinful man." Like, you know what I mean? That's a weird reaction. But it's because he recognises who Jesus is in this moment. Because he knows there isn't that many fish there, like normally. He knows that isn't just a standard thing. And so for Jesus to just be like, "Oh, just throw your net into the water once," and he does it and he gets 2 boats worth of fish. He's like, who is this guy? He commands the sea, you know, this guy is in charge of the sea. And so he recognises something about God in Jesus through this miracle, which is what you see a lot of the time when Jesus does miracles, is it's Jesus both doing good in the world, but also showing the people that there is something of God in him. And so, yeah, Simon's looking at that and going, and he says, "I'm a sinful man, O Lord," which is a very, I feel like would be a very common reaction for us as well. If God suddenly appeared, like, in our, like, messy bedroom, for example, I'd be like, "Oh, I've got to tidy up quickly," you know, or like, whatever. It's just one of those things where if God comes down and he is perfect and you're just stood there, it's like, I am very much not perfect. And so Simon's having that moment right now. For he and all who were with him were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. Oh, that was a good sniff, sorry. Quick pause, that was a very good sniff. And Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching men." And when they brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. So you'll be catching men. That's a weird thing to say to someone. What does Jesus mean by this? Well, essentially he's saying, you're going to be bringing more people into the kingdom. You know, you're going to be pulling, a lot of the time the Bible, I mentioned this in a video at some point, the Bible has the waters as sort of being this metaphor for chaos and, you know, just craziness. And so them pulling the fish up out of the water, Jesus is saying you're going to be catching men, you're going to be pulling men up out of this chaos and bringing them onto the boat with Jesus, essentially. You're going to be pulling these guys out and bringing them into company with Jesus. You'll be catching men and saving lives, essentially, saving people's souls by catching them, which is quite cool. And then when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. And so I think that's one of this passage is called Jesus Calls the First Disciples, and I think that last sentence is probably the big marker of what makes a disciple in the Bible. Because there are a lot of people, like huge crowds, who follow Jesus round and, you know, want to spend time with him and do spend time with him. But I'd say the thing that marks out, like, the 12 disciples as they're traditionally known is A, that Jesus calls to them, but it's B, they drop everything they have and follow him. That's sort of what sets them apart from the rest of the crowd, because a lot of the rest of the crowd would go home in the evening, or they'd bring all this money with them, or they'd bring this stuff with them, or this stuff with them. These guys left everything they had and they just followed Jesus as they were, which is what he calls us to do. There's a parable a bit later on, not parable, a story, a conversation that Jesus has with someone a bit later on that we'll look at, where it's a similar thing. But yeah, and I also mentioned Simon Peter. Why is he called Simon Peter there? Well, because Simon's name changes to Peter. He's called Simon at the start, but his name changes to Peter. And he gets called Peter because he will be the rock on which Jesus builds his church. He becomes a huge, crucially important figure in the Bible. And so that name change signifies that. A lot of the time characters will, figures within the Bible will have their names changed when something significant changes in their life. So Abraham, who I've mentioned loads of times, father of Jewish faith, was called Abram before. His wife Sarai became Sarah. Jacob, from the house of Jacob, the tribes of Jacob, changed to Israel. So God sometimes steps in and will change people's names when a big change happens in their faith with him and their relationship with him. And so the fact that Simon gets called Simon Peter just for that one sentence where it says, "Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man, O Lord," I'm pretty sure that is there because it's showing that that's the first glimpse of his change of heart, his change of character. that's the first moment where you see him start to join up the dots of who Jesus is. And so you get like a little glimpse of the Simon Peter that he is going to become instead of just Simon. But yeah, this is a really cool passage. I reckon we'll leave it there today. But it's just a good it's a very simple account that shows what it is that Jesus calls his disciples to do. And his disciples isn't an exclusive group of those 12 guys 2,000 years ago. His disciples, we are his disciples today. You know, it's something that extends onto us. And the calling is very clear. Look, Jesus says that if you follow me, you'll be fishers of men, you'll be catching men. And what do you have to do to follow him? You have to leave behind everything you have and follow Jesus. And that message still stands for us today, you know, as much as it stood for those guys 2,000 years ago. And so the question is, will you do it? Will I do it? Leave everything and follow him. It's a big call, but it's worthwhile. So yeah, tomorrow we're going to be looking at Jesus cleansing a leper, which is quite exciting. But for now, I will say goodbye and I will drink the rest of my chamomile tea because it seems to be working. Much love, and I'll see you all tomorrow.